The New York Times gets it wrong again. Hi, thanks for watching. Today is Fact Check Friday, and I've got a great fact check for you today. It involves the New York Times and their coverage of Iran from January 5th. Now, I wanted to do this video last week. I've been ill. I just didn't have the energy for it, but I didn't forget. And so I've made it for today's fact check. Now, I was alerted to this by someone that may or may not be Iranian. And I appreciate them giving me a tip on this to fact check it. And if you have a tip, something you would like me to fact check, you can always leave it in the comments. I try to reply to most comments. And here's my email. You can send me an email if you have something you'd like me to check out. And we're going to get to this New York Times article in just a moment, but I want to tell you why this is so important to me. You see, this is personal to me. There are people in my life whose identity is tied to the New York Times. It's like, I'm a good liberal person. I do what good liberal people do. Every Sunday, I get the New York Times, I get some fresh bagels, a big mug of coffee, and that's what I do because I'm a good liberal person. And when I have tried to bring up issues with the New York Times and their bias and their pro-war propaganda and all types of things like this, this is what I get. Please don't tell me that. That goes against my identity. My identity is getting the New York Times every Sunday, getting fresh bagels, having a big mug of coffee. That's my Sunday. That's my identity. Please don't disrupt that. And because of that, I can't even talk about politics or the New York Times with these people. And there are many people like that. They want to believe the New York Times. In fact, I saw that Jimmy Dore was on Joe Rogan yesterday, and Joe Rogan said the same thing. Please don't tell me the New York Times is garbage, because that's all I got left. And that's it. Most people really want to believe that the New York Times is a good source of news. They're not. And I'm going to give you an example of that in today's fact check. Now, what I like to do with a fact check is I like to lay out what a claim is. So a newspaper or someone is making a claim. And I like to be specific about what the claim is, and then I check whether that claim is backed by facts or not. So let's get to the story today. So here we are, the New York Times. Mourners throng Iran's streets for Suleimani funeral marches. The killing of the revered Iranian general really wounded and insulted the national pride, one resident said. I'm not sure why we care what one resident said, but okay, whatever. And they've got this video showing the huge crowds of people. Of course, they're zoomed in really close, so you're not sure exactly how big the crowd is. But that's what good propaganda does. They zoom in really close, and then, oh, look at this. We can see this bridge in Ahvaz, Iran. And there's another angle of the bridge in Ahvaz, Iran. And we zoom out, and is that all? Oh, that's all we see. And this article here by Farnaz Fassihi, January 5th, 2020. Huge crowds of mourners poured into the streets of two Iranian cities on Sunday to pay their respects to Major General Qasem Soleimani, the second most powerful figure in the country and leader of the elite Quds force, who was killed on Friday in an American drone strike near the Baghdad airport. And if we scroll down here, it says, this is what we're going to check. A mass of people snaked across the city's main streets and a long bridge over the Karun River, stretching over 30 kilometers or almost 20 miles. The crowds of men and women in black carried flags and photos of Mr. Suleimani and beat their chest in unison as Islamic prayers blasted from speakers around the city. So this is what we're going to check. That stretching over 30 kilometers or almost 20 miles. Was this a 20-mile long procession of people? That is the claim that we're going to check today. Was it 20 miles long? If it was, the New York Times is correct. If it's nowhere near 20 miles, the New York Times is wrong. Okay, now I just want to point out something interesting that the New York Times does here. So we see another picture. Of course, they're zoomed in, so we don't get to see where the end of the people are. But we actually can go to different sources, and there was an aerial view that went the entire route of the people. Now, it's not listed here on the New York Times, but I looked at it, and I checked it out, and we'll get to that in a second. Now, when we come down here to the bottom, you'll notice that there's no comments. It's interesting. The New York Times does not allow comments on this piece of propaganda. I wonder why. But we can see the comments over on Twitter, where they posted a link to the article. And here it is again. A crowd of people stretching over 30 kilometers or almost 20 miles poured out onto the streets of Ahvaz, Iran, on Sunday to mourn the death of General Suleimani. Well, in the comments to this tweet, you have people pointing out some alternative facts, maybe some different viewpoints. And if we scroll down, here's the overhead view of the entire crowd, right here. And I've put that onto a map in Google Maps. So let's see how far this video, I saw where it began, and it goes all the way across the bridge, and then we pass by 1, 2, 3, and then right here at this park is where it ends. Okay? So let's see where that is on Google Maps. Well, the interesting thing is on Google Maps, we can look at distances. And from the aerial footage, we went from here to here. And according to Google, who knows everything, it's 1.51 kilometers. 4,970 feet. Yeah. Is that even a mile? I guess that's a mile. A little over a mile. 1.5 kilometers. That's it. The New York Times has claimed that it's 20 miles. 20 miles. Now, the question is, does the New York Times know that they've made an error? Well, they should, because dozens of people have pointed it out in this Twitter thread that the New York Times posted. The New York Times absolutely knows that what they said was wrong, and they have not corrected this. This went out on the 5th of this month. Today is, what's today? The 17th. And they haven't corrected it. No corrections have been made at all. And what happens if you send a correction to the author? Oh, you're blocked from following Farnaz Fassihi and from viewing her tweets. That seems like a good way of dealing with it. And so the claim that the New York Times makes that there was 20 miles of people in this procession, not true. Do they know that it's not true? They do. And they don't care. They're not correcting the story because they don't care. They can misinform you. They can find out that they're wrong, and they won't correct it. Yeah. And if you call this out, you get blocked. That's what they do. Now, I am going to call my shot. I'm going to do something here. I am so convinced that the New York Times is putting out nonsense garbage every single week. I'm going to be like Babe Ruth. I'm pointing to the fences. This Sunday, January 19th, I'm going to go buy the New York Times. And next week, I am going to do stories all week about that issue of the New York Times and the garbage that they print in it this coming Sunday. I know it hasn't been printed yet, Tom. How do you know that they're going to print nonsense? It's because I've been reading the New York Times long enough that I can guarantee that they are going to print things that are factually wrong, that are not true at all, just like this story, just like this fact check I did today, that I'm calling it right now. This Sunday's edition of the New York Times is going to be filled with lies, and I'm going to share those with you next week. So if you like this video, please do me a favor, share it somewhere else. Share it on Facebook, share it on Reddit, share it on 4chan. I don't care. But you have to help me share it, because otherwise, people will just go back to eating their bagels, reading their New York Times, having their coffee, and putting their hands over their ears and ignoring the truth. And I have one other favor. I've started a second channel on streaming reviews. I've only done a couple reviews so far, but I'm doing reviews on shows on Hulu, Netflix, Amazon Prime, Apple TV Plus, that type of thing. If that interests you at all, there'll be a link at the end of this video and in the description. I'm trying to get to 100 subscribers, and I could do that today. If you are interested, please check that out. I would appreciate that. Let me know your thoughts on this fact check and what to expect next week in the comments. Peace.